Hello and welcome everyone. It's exciting to touch base with all of you on a weekly basis. And today I'm delighted to be joined by our patient navigators, Catherine Small and Alison Bulat. Welcome. If we can go to the next slide, I'll just share the brief agenda. As always, these Thursday meetings are meant to be an opportunity to answer your questions, what's on your mind, what you want to know about the trial or ALS research in general. And so I'll share a few updates, but also, we want to spend most of the time for your questions. Next slide. As you know, we launched the trial over the summer. This is a perpetual adaptive trial. It has many goals. Most importantly, the main goal is to accelerate the time it takes to develop new treatments for ALS. And we really want to develop many treatments for all people with ALS. And we're doing that by testing multiple drugs. They're called regimens in our protocol, regimen A, B, and C, which are already open for enrollment. And we're literally just a few days away from launching regimen D as well. So we launched with 3 drugs. Now we're adding the 4th, but please know that we are going to continue to add many more drugs over the next few months and years again, until we find treatments for all people with ALS. The nice thing about the platform trial is that we leverage a common infrastructure. And what that means is that we're able to do something that's not normally possible in the context of traditional standalone trials. We can reduce the number of people who are on placebo because we can share the data from everyone who's on placebo. So for the platform trial, the randomization ratio is 3:1. What that means is that for every 4 people that enter the trial, 3 will get active drug and only 1 will get placebo. And the placebo portion of the trial is only 6 months long. After that, people who complete 6 months of testing will be given the option to receive the drug, the active drug, for many months as part of an open label extension. So again, all of this design was discussed with the patient community. We really appreciate the input, and we really think we built something that's a step in the right direction in terms of making sure that we have an efficient design, statistically sound design, but also very much considering the needs of the patients first. Next slide. So we are currently enrolling at 33 sites, and you can go on our website to find the center near you. Next slide. And here I'm listing the sites that are open at this time. All sites are working hard to really finish the last steps towards their activation, and we hope to add more over the next few days. Of note, we're also issuing a new call for new sites in addition to the ones that were selected. As you may remember from previous webinars, we selected 54, 33 are active, and then we're going to add more on top of the 54 in 2021. Next slide. And this is our enrollment update. As you may remember, if you've been following this webinar series, the idea of providing weekly updates came from the patient community, and specifically from a group of patients from IMALS, as well as patients who participate in our patient advisory committee. As of today, over 200 people have signed informed consent to participate in the trial. And you can see the numbers. There's basically a flow from the main consent. People are assigned to different regimens, and then they are assigned to receive study drug, either active or placebo, in a 3:1 ratio. At this time, we have 153 people who are currently receiving study drug, active or placebo, and the first that were enrolled in July, will be eligible for an open label extension in January. So that kind of flow I showed before will be activated from the placebo-controlled trial to the open label extension in early 2021, in January, in fact. Next slide. And Catherine and Alison, who are here today, are here to help answer questions from the community today, but not just today, at all times really. They manage a phone number and an email that you can use to contact them, and so that they can provide more information about the trial. A lot of the information that I'm sharing today is actually on our website, and we're working on expanding our frequently asked question section, as well as other informational material that we have on the website website. Everything needs to be approved by the central IRB. So we're working on that. And then as soon as everything is posted, you'll have access to even more material. But for now, please reach out to Alison and Catherine for more detailed and personal questions. Next slide. And our weekly webinars will continue, although we will have a short break at the end of December. You can always find our schedule and registration links on our website, as well as the recordings of previous meetings, and also the slide decks will be available, so you can always refer back to them. And we put together a series of webinars about each drug's mechanism of action and science, so you'll have an opportunity to ask questions about the drugs. We've a number of panelists from each company, the scientists that actually developed the treatments that are being tested in the platform trial. They will be on the webinar with us in early 2021. We are submitting all of the slides. Everything has been prepared. We are submitting it to the IRB, and as soon as those are approved, we can schedule the webinars. Probably we will keep them at the same time on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern time, so that we kind of keep consistency in terms of the meeting times, and so we'll kind of switch it up in early 2021, so that will, in addition to these enrollment updates, you'll also have an opportunity to have the scientists on the webinar to ask detailed questions about the science behind every drug. And so with that, before we start taking questions from the audience, I wanted to ask Catherine and then Alison, about your interactions with the patient community this week. I know you keep receiving questions, and questions change over time as obviously more sites become active, more people become involved and participate in the trial. So just wanted to ask you, what are some of the most commonly asked questions are this week? And maybe you can help us, tell us more also about your role and how you help patients who ask these questions navigate the trial. Catherine, do you want to start?
Sure. So hi, I'm Catherine Small, the patient navigator for the platform trial. So I help throughout the week answering questions. You can send questions to the email address. I have that open all day on my computer. And an exciting update, I know in previous webinars we had said when you call the patient navigator number, it goes to voicemail, but we've got new technology up and running. So now if I'm available, I'm able to pick up the phone and we can have a conversation right then and there rather than playing phone tag. So that's an exciting development. But in terms of the questions that I've been receiving over the past week, one common inquiry I've been getting from patients is just kind of seeking clarification about the enrollment process. So when people reach out and connect with one of our research sites, I will kind of outline what to expect next. And so to kind of answer that, the first step is reaching out to one of our research centers. And then when the research team there is aware of your interest, what they'll want to do is get to know you better. So they'll want your medical records, and if you're a patient there already, they'll have access to those records. But if you aren't a patient, the team will likely request medical records via fax, and then they'll review those records, maybe ask for more information if they need it. And then the next step thereafter would be to set up a pre-screen. And usually the pre-screen is done over the phone, and it's just an opportunity for the research team to talk through the platform trial criteria in more depth, and now that they have more medical knowledge about you. And if that goes well, so if based on that pre-screen phone call conversation, they think you might be a good candidate for the trial, the next step would then be to set up a master protocol screening visit. And unlike the pre-screen, that visit would be done in person. So you would actually go to the research center, and that's kind of the last step in the enrollment process, because at that visit, you get a final determination about whether you're eligible to enroll in the trial. So then the decision would be in your hands. If you're eligible at that visit, you can decide to enroll and take the next steps towards participating.
Great, thank you, Catherine. And I'll ask the same question to you, Alison, and people, please feel free to type in just in the chat if you have questions about the enrollment process, about any questions really that you may have about the trial. So what have you found, Alison, in your conversations with the community?
Thank you. To pick up similar to what Catherine has been hearing, I've been hearing a lot, how many study visits should participants expect, and will they be in person at this time? So I think that's a great question to consider when you're deciding which site you may want to enroll in. to figure that out and to understand what the commitment is in a clinical trial. For this trial in particular, there are, I believe, 7 to 8 in-person visits, so it's pretty frequent. And while there are remote and alternative plans in place, if it's necessary for the safety of the participants because of COVID, those could look very different depending on where you are and where the site is that you're interested in. So if you are concerned about that, it's best probably to contact that site directly to see what's in place there, but always feel free to reach out to us and we'll help as well.
Great, thank you. And I see a few questions are coming in. Maybe Catherine and Alison, can you read one and then I'll start answering?
Sure. So the first question we have here is, what assessments will be made at the end of the first 6-month treatment period?
Yeah, that's a good question. So essentially, it's the same type of outcome measures and biomarkers that are taken all along the way. So essentially things like the ALS-FRSR, which is a questionnaire to tell how someone is doing on the drug, some quality of life measurements, measures of muscle strength, measure of respiratory function, as well as collection of blood and urine samples for biomarkers. There's also an optional lumbar puncture. Not everyone needs to have it, but that's done at 2 time points during the trial. So essentially all of these measurements are repeated, and then there's a specific schedule of exactly what is done at each specific visit. But most of them, not all, but most of them are also done at the very end of the 6-month treatment period. And that's why I want to go back to what Alison was saying about sort of the remote schedule versus in-person schedule. So the default and the preferred method is to have everyone attend their visits in person, as long as safe to do so in the context of the pandemic, because it's very important to collect all the outcome measures, because otherwise, we wouldn't be able to essentially tell if the drug works or not. And the primary goal of the trial is to be able to tell if these drugs work or not. And so obviously that's why we need as complete assessments as possible, even in the middle of the pandemic. So that those are the things that will be collected all along the trial, and especially at the final visit.
And I can go ahead and read another question here. So the question is, has the University of Iowa started enrolling? They are my clinic. I've been trying to get enrolled, but they are having staffing issues over the holidays.
The University of Iowa has started enrolling. It's one of the 33 active sites. I know they're doing a great job at enrolling participants. As you know, different parts of the country have been affected in different ways and at different times by the pandemic. And so obviously all of these has ripple effects. Now you mentioned the holidays specifically, but obviously, every clinic basically manages sort of the workload, I guess, or their capacity locally, because we obviously depends on how many people they have available. We did hear from other sites, not this site in particular, but many sites that there's been staff redeployed for COVID reasons. There's even been furloughs at some sites, and certainly some restrictions to research activities by some institutions. Now I have to say that all sites are working creatively to be able to continue to monitor their participants despite some of the restrictions that are now being put in place by institutions, because you can imagine while this research obviously is very important, some hospitals are sort of shifting priorities and trying to sort of prioritize clinical care if they are at sort of what they call disaster capacity, or kind of very high volumes in the hospital. And so essentially that's why some of the enrollment might have been, might be slower right now until the COVID situation gets resolved. But I know the sites are working creatively to do all of this. So what we've done for some sites is basically to make sure that people can still collect local safety labs. Obviously, safety is #1 priority, and we can collect local labs at different PCP's offices, etc. But all of these require coordination and time and effort from the staff, from people that work at the site. So, yeah.
And then we have a question here. what is the criteria that the local group would use to separate among the many local patients with ALS in the area that want to be in the trial?
That's a great question. So so essentially, this depends a little bit on the clinic. So I don't think we can speak on behalf of every clinic, but essentially what happens is that I can tell you what we do, at least at our clinic, is that we do maintain a careful tracker of everyone who expresses interest, and we constantly look it over and try to get back to participants as quickly as possible. So essentially, we ask at our clinic, we ask people who have an interest, exactly what Catherine said, to send us some more information, to be able to tell, even on paper, so to speak, if somebody is likely to be eligible or not. And then for the people who clearly are not eligible, we let them know, and we let their doctor know as well, if they give us permission, so that again, we are all on the same page about that. And then if people are not clearly eligible or not, depending on the records, because maybe we need to get more information, our nursing staff works with people who asked to get more information so that we can make that determination. Now, that still leaves many people who are eligible for the trial, quite frankly, more than we have capacity to accept all at the same time. So in other words, we know that we want to accept many patients and want to continue to expand, but we cannot enroll all of them at the same time, essentially. We need to stagger them, because otherwise we wouldn't have enough people to do the work, essentially, which is to schedule visits, collect the biomarkers, process the biomarkers, etc. So right now we are actually, at least at our site, I can tell you, we just hired 2 new coordinators with the goal of basically increasing capacity by 3 over the next few weeks. So we were certainly doing that. We also hired a new nurse. So certainly, we're doing all of that. It takes a little bit of time, obviously, to increase capacity so drastically, but we're working on that, at least at our site.
And another question here is just seeking clarification. So is randomization blinded throughout the trial? Meaning, could a patient who receives the placebo initially potentially continue on placebo after the first 6 months of treatment?
That's a good point. So I think, 2 things to clarify. So after 6 months, somebody who finishes the first 6 months, they will have the offer to continue an open label extension. So if somebody continues on open label extension, by definition, they will not get placebo. They will get the active drug. And that continues for several months. So that's option 1, I guess. Somebody completes the placebo-controlled trial and goes on an open label extension, which means no placebo. Now, it's possible that somebody might say, well, I don't want this open label extension because for whatever reason, they prefer not to take that drug, specific drug long-term. They can go back as a new person, so to speak, and restart from scratch. So they would re-enroll and kind of redo the trial exactly the way they just completed it. So when you do a second round, you cannot be assigned to the same regimen, meaning you're not going to be assigned to the same drug twice. So by definition, if you complete 6 months on one drug, active or placebo, then the second round would be with something different. So for example, if you start with regimen A, the second time will be regimen B or C or D. It is possible, in theory, to receive placebo twice, because again, that's the same level of randomization, even the second time. It's almost like starting all over. The chances of receiving placebo twice are about 6%. So it's very low. However, it's not 0, it's theoretically possible. But people have the option, also the alternative option, to go on open label extension.
And the next question here, I am an ALS patient in Dallas, Texas, and I was diagnosed in March 2016. I'm more than 3 years into my ALS progression. Could it be possible to get expanded access since I'm not enrolled in the HEALEY platform sites such as Texas Neurology?
Yeah, I mean, there's different questions, I think, embedded in this question. So I want to maybe take a moment to talk about some EAP developments and kind of the overall framework. So first of all, we at this time, we are working on building some EAP projects in parallel to the platform trial. So what that means is that we're going to build a few projects where some people can get access to the drugs if they're not eligible, like you are mentioning, if you're not eligible for the platform trial, they could have the option to enroll in an expanded access program. Now, because these programs take time to kind of set up and are expensive, they're going to be small at the beginning. The ultimate goal absolutely is to expand and give this option to many, many people, you know, potentially everyone who wants to. However, we're not there quite yet, you know, so we are working on that. We have a few single center EAPs at our institution at Mass General, and there's a few institutions around the country that have small EAPs. Certainly it's not the norm, and certainly we want more of them. But again, we are starting to expand a few, to start a few in 2021 as some of the HEALEY platform sites. The goal ultimately is to actually expand that significantly. Again, these projects are very complicated actually to set up and very expensive, but we're certainly working in that direction. Now, the EAPs, or expanded access, they are sort of a hybrid between clinical care and research, because they're not really clinical trial, but they are sort of an expansion of clinical care with a research component to it. It's a little bit of a hybrid. They are kind of in a unique space. Because of that, we do ask people to have established care, because again, they're more clinical care, sort of a expanded clinical care. So, you know, for example, at our site, for enrollment into a regular trial, so to speak, for example, the platform trial, people don't have to be patients at our clinic. However, for an expanded access program, yes, they do, because again, it's prescribed in the context of a physician-patient relationship. And so that, again, it's a special regulatory space. And for that reason, you need to be established at whatever site that offers that. Unfortunately, right now, only a few sites offer this type of thing. So, so again, we're trying to expand them, but until then, I think that that's going to be small by definition.
And then I think someone is just seeking some clarification about eligibility criteria. So the next question is, I heard the 3-year period is from onset of disease, not from diagnosis.
That is correct. That's actually standard in ALS trials. So I would say that the vast majority, if not all, ALS trials consider onset sort of as the beginning of the period when you start counting, sort of for eligibility reasons. So you're correct.
And the next one, I think it's referring to some legislature. So I apologize if I don't know what the abbreviation here stands for, but the question is, will EAPs be more widely available if HR 8662 and Act for ALS pass?
I mean, that would be one of the goals, I think, of the legislation in general, to make things more accessible and things like EAPs more accessible. So I would imagine that in general, all these kind of legislative changes could sort of support some of the innovative things that we're trying to do. Obviously, again, it takes time to set these things, these projects up. But I think in general, I think we see momentum in terms of support to more innovative designs. And I think all of that kind of community participation helps.
And a question here is, say I get into a trial and the drug worked well, what happens next? Do you still get treatment, or do you have to wait for the FDA to approve, etc.?
Yeah, so I can tell you, you know, this depends a little bit. For our trial specifically, what we are proposing is that people who participate in the trial and then roll over to the open label extension, the proposal is for them to stay on that until we know what happens, what the result of the trial is. So for example, let's say that people start enrolling in the regimens, regimen A, B, and C, and we expect the results of those, you know, next year by the end of 2021. So the first people to enroll, for example, the people who started in July, will be eligible for the open label extension around January. So the goal for our trial, and that's what we're planning to do, and that's what's gonna, you know, that's what we're set up to do, is for these people to continue in the open label extension until we know the final results of that particular drug. So let's say that they start the open label extension in January of 2021, because before the end of the year, we will know if the drug works or not. Obviously, if the drug doesn't work, there's no point in continuing the open label extension. If the drug works, then we would work with the industry partner to continue that open label extension. Again, I cannot guarantee that that's going to be indefinite, but that's certainly the intention. If something works, to continue access for people who are in the open label extension. In fact, for example, for the Amylyx trial, that's exactly what's happening. So because the trial results were positive, the people who are still in the open label extension have been maintained on the open label extension, and in fact, they're still on the drug. And the plan is to continue to have them on the drug until we know what's next with the FDA.
If a person is considered not eligible for this trial, will you help them identify other trials for which they may be eligible?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's a great question. I think it's, one of the roles of the patient navigator is to help connect people with research. So I know that maybe Catherine and Alison, you can explain how you do that, and, a few suggestions. Obviously, I also, before Alison and Catherine speak, I would like to say that it's also very important to continue the relationship with your care team. Neurologist, physician, nurses, the people that you see in your ALS care center, to also have them guide you in terms of, let's say, if you're not eligible for this trial, what are the best options? So I think it's very important, it starts with the relationship with your clinical care team, but certainly the patient navigator can help you on the research side. Maybe Catherine, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I like to provide options, even if it's not the platform trial that's a good fit, but there are some resources through NEALS and clinical trials online that you can kind of peruse. We also have a research access nurse who's a wonderful resource to learn about other clinical trials, and I usually will connect people with her to discuss it.
Yeah.
And somebody's asking what ALS criteria is necessary to be enrolled in the trial. They're also asking when Cedars-Sinai will enroll.
Yeah, so the criteria are listed publicly on clinicaltrials.gov, and if you go on our website, you can find a link to that. So please go on the Healey Center website. It's a long list. I can just summarize it for you, but again, just to be very specific, you can also look at the exact list. Essentially, the time since symptom onset is 3 years, as somebody else mentioned earlier. Vital capacity needs to be at least 50% of predicted, and people need to be able to swallow. People can be on riluzole and or edaravone as long as they are on a stable dose. And there's very few exclusion criteria, essentially things that are uncontrolled medical problems. So let's say if somebody has, very severe kidney disease or liver disease or some other medical problem that could really make participation problematic from a safety perspective. But other than that, those are the main criteria. But again, the full list is available on the website, and then you can also call Catherine and Alison after that, after you review them, for some detailed discussion, and maybe you can discuss whether you will be eligible or not, most likely eligible or not. Cedars is enrolling. Cedars is an active site in the trial.
Someone's asking, is there a cost associated with the open label extension? What is an open label extension?
So there is no cost associated with the trial. I mean, obviously it takes time and effort to participate because people will have to drive to the center. So, but there's no charge, there's no fee, I guess, to get in either the randomized trial or the open label extension. Open label extension means that at the end of the trial, people who complete the trial are given the option to receive the active treatment for kind of on an open label basis, meaning there's no placebo. They will be given access to the treatment for several months.
And then for the sake of time, I might paraphrase one of the questions here. Somebody's asking, in general, how long does it take between the patient's agreement and actually signing a consent form to then the actual treatment beginning?
Yeah, I think it's important to discuss that with the clinic or the site where you are discussing participation, because quite frankly, it's a matter of local resources and like how many coordinators they have. It just takes to get kind of the materials, the drug available at the pharmacy, have a room available, have the investigator available, etc. So there isn't a set time. I think it's more about, you know, a discussion, and also when people are enrolled, are invited for a screening visit, there is an informed consent process. So while, you know, we're discussing the trial in general terms here, obviously there is a need to conduct the study ethically, and that begins with a detailed review of the study with the person who's actually going to do the study with you. So, so again, obviously, the community is well informed about the trial, but, you know, I really want to emphasize the importance of having a detailed conversation before signing the consent form and proceeding with the trial. So again, it can be, in theory, could happen quickly, you know, if they have availability. It's just a matter of bandwidth and availability of people on kind of on the ground, on the, you know, in clinic.
And then we have a follow-up question here. So when we were talking earlier about what criteria sites are using when working through patient interest, somebody's just asking, is this up to the individual clinics?
It is, because really, you know, it's really a partnership between the clinic and the participant. You know, this is an optional research study, and again, it's really partnership between the person who runs the trial locally and the person who participates, and everything needs to be carefully coordinated, etc. And obviously, safety is first. So it's important to make sure that, you know, somebody doesn't have maybe some medical problems that will be problematic when given an experimental drug. So I think it's really something that, you know, we cannot manage centrally. You know, it's really not a standardized process. It's more a process of collaboration and partnership between the investigator, the coordinator, and the participant, so that they can coordinate things in a way that's doable for everyone involved. I don't know, Alison or Catherine, if you have any other thoughts about this.
Yeah, I'll just say I know that our research teams, you know, this is a question that they've brought up too, where when there's so much interest, it's kind of hard. There's no gold standard for how to work through that interest, but I'll just reiterate that our research teams are doing their best to reach out to people in the most efficient way possible.
Great, I think we worked through the questions. There's one more question just came through. Catherine, do you want to read it?
Yes, so in just under the wire here, we have a question saying, regarding the eligibility criteria that requires 3 years or less from the onset, not from diagnosis, what if the initial symptoms were very vague and the patient is uncertain when they began?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, for most people with ALS, the initial symptoms are somewhat vague. So it's a conversation between the investigator and the patient, we ask them to use all available information to make that determination. Sometimes, you know, there's medical records, sometimes there are diagnostic tests that were done around the time of onset to figure out what that symptom was. In terms of our protocol, we define onset as weakness. Weakness in an arm or hand or legs or the trunk, or difficulty speaking or swallowing, or difficulty with respiration. So that there's a clear sort of set of symptoms that are considered sort of valid, so to speak, to determine onset. Things like muscle twitches or cramps are not considered necessarily the true onset, because again, we define weakness or some as expressed as some of the symptoms I just described, and all investigators are trained on this. So there is you know, sort of uniform processes for enrollment. Great, I hope this helped answer some of the questions, and we will meet again next week. So please contact Catherine and Alison so that they can answer any additional questions you might have in the meantime. Okay, great. Thank you. See you next week. Thank you.